This story was sent by a viewer who, at first, we thought it was just a normal story. But after the ending, everything feels completely different. No more talking. Let's start the story. Picture this. You're completely alone on a dock in the dead of night, staring out into the black water of one of the most infamous lakes in America. Today, we're unpacking a truly chilling account centered right there, at Georgia's Lake Lanier. This explainer isn't just about a terrifying personal encounter. We're going to analyze this narrative through two very different lenses, local folklore and the very real, very dark history of the lake's creation. Because as you'll see, it's a perfect example of how real-world history can literally bubble up to the surface and become modern urban legend.
To really wrap our heads around this, we've got a roadmap. First up, we'll look at our reluctant witness, Marcus Webb. Then, we'll dive into the terrifying specifics of the figure he saw in the water. After that, we're going to uncover an ominous warning from the past, dig into the actual sunken history of Lake Lanier, and finally, wrap up with the lingering mystery that ties this whole shebang together.
Section 1. The Reluctant Witness, Marcus Webb's Profile. Now, before we get into the encounter itself, we really need to understand Marcus Webb's mindset. It's absolutely crucial here. Look at his profile before July 2021. He's a 36-year-old logistics manager, a youth baseball coach, totally grounded. This is a science-minded skeptic who literally only believes in what he can measure. But look at the after. Following this incident, he is fundamentally changed. He's completely haunted by something he just cannot explain away. He's not the type to have an overactive imagination, you know? And that makes him a deeply reluctant and highly credible witness. Okay, let's set the scene. It's July 23rd, 2021. Flowery Branch, Lake Lanier. It's one of those warm, thick Georgia Wednesday nights. Marcus is hanging out at his buddy Terrence Mitchell's family lake house. Now keep in mind, Marcus had only had 2 beers the entire evening. Terrence has already called it a night, so Marcus is just out there, totally alone, sitting on the edge of a private wooden dock that stretches out into the calm, moonlit water.
Section 2. The Figure in the Water. The Dock Encounter.
The terror out there on the water didn't just happen all at once. It escalated in 3 distinct steps. Step 1, Marcus just notices some pale floating debris about 15 yards out. Totally normal after a recent summer storm. But step 2, this is where logic just completely breaks down. He realizes the object isn't drifting with the current. No, it's moving deliberately against it, heading straight toward his dock. And then, step 3, the shape finally resolves into something horrifyingly human. The distinct shape of a pale woman floating face up. I want to read this description directly from the source material, because the visual imagery here is incredibly precise and honestly terrifying. Webb says, she was floating face up just below the surface of the water, pale as milk, her hair spreading out around her head like dark ink dissolving in the dark water. Notice how vivid yet totally unnatural that is. At first, he actually thinks someone is drowning, so he calls out to help, but the figure just stops. It hovers there, 8 to 10 yards away, staring blankly up at the night sky.
So the turning point in this narrative happens right here. Marcus calls out a second time, and slowly, the figure's head turns to look directly at him. And then comes the absolute climax of this visual horror. Her mouth opens underwater, but it opens far, far wider than a human mouth should reasonably be able to open. It's this grotesque detail that completely shatters any remaining hope Marcus had that this was just some drowning swimmer needing help.
And the horror wasn't just visual. The auditory details he gives are fascinating. Webb describes the sound coming out of that unnaturally wide mouth. He says it was a low, resonant moan, and it seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than the surface of the lake, as if it were traveling up from the bottom of something very deep and very old. This wasn't a human scream. It's described as something ancient, literally echoing up from the very bottom of the lake itself.
Webb's reaction? Pure, unfiltered panic. He sprints inside, locking the glass door behind him. From the kitchen, he peeks back out and he sees the figure has moved. She's now right at the very base of the dock, staring up through the wooden planks. He wakes his friend Terrence in an absolute frenzy, dragging him to the glass door to look. But of course, when Terrence looks, the water is completely empty. It's just moonlight on a still lake. And remember, Marcus only had 2 beers, a fact Terrence was definitely pretty skeptical about in that moment.
Section 3. An ominous warning. The previous owner.
The next morning, when Marcus tells Terrence the full, terrifying story, Terrence suddenly remembers this strange, forgotten detail from his family's past.
When they bought the property nearly 2 decades prior, the previous owner, an old guy named Gerald Fitch, gave Terrence, his father, a very specific, very strange warning. He said never sit on the dock alone at night.
And when pressed for a reason, Fitch gave this incredible response. Something lived in the deep part of the lake near their property. Something that had been there since before the lake existed. This quote is absolutely brilliant. Why? Because it instantly shifts us from a localized ghost story into a very real, geographically specific mystery. Think about it. How can something live in a lake since before the lake even existed?
Section 4. The Sunken History, the Real Lake Lanier. To actually understand that warning, we have to ground this account in cold, hard, historical facts. And it all hinges on one pivotal year, 1956. This is the year that literally changed the entire landscape for this specific geographic area in Georgia.
Look at this timeline. Before 1956, Lake Lanier simply did not exist. It was a valley. And it wasn't empty either. It was filled with active, bustling communities. We're talking towns, farms, churches, and prominently, a cemetery. In 1956, the Army Corps of Engineers dammed the Chattahoochee River and intentionally flooded the entire valley to create the reservoir we now know as Lake Lanier. All of those structures submerged. And today, the lake holds a massive, notorious reputation for unexplained phenomena.
This grim historical reality feeds directly into the lake's modern haunted reputation. The official plan before the 1956 flooding was to respectfully relocate all the bodies from the valley cemetery. That was the plan, but the reality? Much darker. Widely documented historical records show that not all bodies were successfully relocated before the water rushed in. There are literally still graves sitting at the bottom of Lake Lanier today.
The source material backs up the eerie nature of the lake's depths with tangible, modern facts. Lake Lanier officially has one of the highest drowning rates of any lake in the entire United States. Local divers routinely report finding the remnants of those old sunken buildings, roads, and foundations down in the murky dark. Even crazier, multiple divers have reported seeing completely unexplainable things in those deep sections. It's gotten to the point where some divers outright refuse to ever return to the bottom. No way.
Section 5. A lingering mystery. The aftermath.
For Marcus Webb, the aftermath is a heavy, lingering psychological toll. He has never returned to that lake house, not once. He hasn't even spoken to his friend Terrence about it since. Look, whether you're a skeptic or a firm believer in the supernatural, the crucial takeaway here is that the trauma Webb experienced is entirely real to him. He remains haunted. He lies awake at night seeing that pale face slowly turning in the black water.
And it leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought, directly inspired by Webb's own conclusions. When you have a massive body of water built directly over displaced towns and submerged graves, the line between history and folklore gets incredibly blurry. Is it just an old man's spooky warning, or does Lake Lanier actually hold its dead longer than it should? It's a fascinating, terrifying look at how the past refuses to stay buried, especially when it's buried underwater. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like this video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more.
Moving on to the next one, this story was sent by a viewer who wishes to remain anonymous. He claims that after that night, he has never been able to sleep normally again. No more talking, let's start the story. It was March 2021 in Knoxville, Tennessee. A standard security system, installed just to protect a quiet suburban home, was working exactly as it was supposed to. Only, it captured something completely impossible. A quiet house, a rational homeowner, and a nightmare caught right there on digital tape. Jason Merritt is an IT professional. He troubleshoots servers for a living. His whole worldview is built on cause and effect. You know, if there's a glitch, he traces it to the source and he fixes it. He's not a man prone to leaps of faith. He spent months searching for a rational explanation for what he saw and found absolutely nothing. Section 1. The Logical Homeowner. Establishing the baseline. In the summer of 2020, Jason and his wife Claire moved into a 1962 split-level ranch house. It had a partially finished basement with wood paneling and one of those drop ceilings. Jason personally installed and maintained a flawless 4-camera security system. He put one on the porch, one at the back door, one in the main upstairs hallway, and one down in the basement. They were recorded continuously to a local hard drive with 30 days of storage. He checked them weekly. For the first 6 months, there were 0 anomalies. No technical glitches, no blind spots, no strange events. Just a perfect, logical baseline. Section 2. A pattern of anomalies. Escalating red flags. The red flags started to escalate. A box moved across the basement overnight. Jason figured he'd just moved it and forgot. A damp, metallic smell would come and go. He blamed the old pipes. The light flickering above the washer? Faulty wiring. Claire mentioned that the air felt heavy and different at the bottom of the stairs. Jason blamed the humidity of an old Tennessee basement. He systematically explained away every single warning sign. The breaking point occurred on the morning of March 4th. Jason went down to switch the laundry and found the door to the small, windowless utility closet wide open. Now, this wasn't a door that could just blow open in a draft. Jason had personally installed a hook and eye latch on the outside to keep it shut. The latch wasn't broken, it wasn't forced, it was simply unlatched, as if someone had carefully lifted the hook and swung the door open from the inside. A physical impossibility for an empty 4x5-foot concrete box. This sent him straight to his laptop to check the tapes. Section 3. The basement camera footage, the night of March 3rd, 2021. Jason pulls up the time-stamped video. At 11:47 p.m., the lights go out at the top of the stairs. The basement is pitch black, lit only by the faint green glow of the circuit breaker panel peeking from under the utility closet door. Then, at exactly 2:19 a.m., the hook latch on the outside of the closet rises entirely on its own. It disengaged, and the door slowly swings inward. The footage reveals a man walking out of the closet. Jason watched this 11 times. It's a tall man wearing dark clothing. The intruder keeps his face completely turned away from the camera lens the entire time. He moves with deliberate caution, as if he'd mapped out the camera's exact placement and blind spots long before he ever opened that door. 43. The intruder moves to the dead center of the basement floor and stands perfectly, silently still for exactly 43 seconds. Jason counted them. 43 seconds of a stranger standing like a statue in the dark at 2 a.m. The man walks to the far wall of the basement, turns his back to the camera, and just stands there for 20 minutes, facing a blank, wood-paneled wall in the dark. He doesn't search for valuables. He doesn't move toward the stairs to the bedrooms. Finally, at 2:41 a.m., he retreats back into the tiny utility closet, pulls the door shut, and on the video, Jason watches the external hook latch drop back into place from the inside. Section 4. The police investigation. KPD officers Paulson and Reyes. Terrified, feeling a cold dread filling his chest, Jason calls the Knoxville police. Officer Paulson and veteran Detective Reyes arrive and watch the footage. Paulson's jaw tightens. Detective Reyes watches it twice in absolute silence. Then they go downstairs to search the utility closet. The physical reality of the space contradicted the digital evidence entirely. The physical closet is 4 feet by 5 feet, solid concrete floor, a water heater, a breaker panel, some paint cans. No hidden doors, no crawl spaces. Yet, the undeniable digital evidence showed a tall man unlatching the door, exiting and re-entering, latching it behind him. A man simply cannot walk out of and vanish into a sealed, solid concrete box. Detective Reyes gets down on her knees to examine the floor of that tiny closet. She finds the only physical clue in the entire house: a seam. Hidden beneath the concrete, she presses her foot against it. It holds firm. Whatever is beneath that floor, if anything at all, has been sealed tight for a very long time. Section 5. The Impossible Intruder. The History of Gerald Tatum. 3 days later, Detective Reyes calls Jason personally. She had dug into the property's history and uncovered the dark past of the man who owned the house from 1978 to 1999. The previous owner was a man named Gerald Tatum, and his criminal record perfectly matched the nightmare on Jason's hard drive. Tatum was convicted in 1999 of multiple break-ins. His M.O. was uniquely terrifying. Police found evidence that he secretly accessed homes through basement utility areas. He was known for slipping in through the foundations and living undetected inside homes with the residents for extended periods. An old criminal returning to his former home using a hidden access point he built years ago. It made terrifying sense. But there was one final detail. Detective Reyes told Jason that Gerald Tatum passed away in 2009. He had been dead for exactly 12 years before that camera recorded him walking out of the closet. Section 6. The Lingering Aftermath. A New Apartment. An Old Fear. Unsurprisingly, Jason and Claire moved out of the house in less than a week. They relocated to a third-floor apartment in West Knoxville, specifically choosing a place with absolutely no basement. But the psychological trauma followed them. Claire is still terrified of enclosed spaces. Jason keeps the original security footage hard drive in his desk drawer. He never opens the file, using its existence as a morbid tether to his own sanity, proof that he didn't just imagine it. Yet, late at night, both of them report the exact same sensation, the distinct, heavy feeling of someone standing just behind them. Jason set up a new security system in their third-floor apartment, but he hasn't checked the continuous footage in 6 weeks. Because when you've seen a dead man walk out of a solid concrete floor, logic no longer protects you. What might he find if he finally opens that folder? If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Moving on to the next one, this story was sent by a viewer. No more talking, let's start the story.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a narrative that is honestly just truly chilling. We're going to do a complete structural breakdown of Rachel Connor's deeply unsettling experience down in Harlan County, Kentucky. And we're going to look at exactly how this story utilizes its setting, sensory details, and just pure absolute isolation to craft a literally perfect scenario of mounting dread. So let's get into it. Here is our roadmap of terror for today. We'll be hitting the Harlan County inheritance, the October 14th escalation, investigating the open cellar, the psychology of rural dread, and finally, sealing the unknown. We're going to uncover exactly why this specific narrative of a 28-year-old inheriting an old farm is so mechanically and psychologically terrifying. All right, Section 1, the Harlan County inheritance, setting the scene for isolation. Okay, let's dive right into this. Our subject, Rachel, moves into her late Aunt Carol's incredibly isolated farmhouse on Route 7. Now, the absolute focal point of the tension on this property is the root cellar. This is an archaic, underground storage space built directly into the earth. It sits about 40 yards from the back door, and just its presence, resting right outside the perimeter of safety, immediately primes our primal fear of dark, buried, underground spaces. And get this, Aunt Carol lived there for 30 years and explicitly, totally avoided it. So, for the first 2 weeks, Rachel actually experiences a really peaceful arrival. You know, she's painting the walls, settling in, making it a home, standard new house stuff. But then, we get these creeping anomalies. Slightly rearranged kitchen chairs, phantom footsteps out on the porch at night that leave literally nothing but a pale gravel driveway in their wake. It's this brilliant contrast, really, that flips the script from a calm, fresh start to the incredibly unsettling reality that someone or something else is there with her. Moving to Section 2, the October 14th escalation, a masterclass in sensory dread. We really need to look at the timeline of this specific night. At 9:30 p.m., Rachel goes to bed early. Exhausted from cleaning the barn, which makes sense. But look at what happens at exactly 3:07 a.m. She doesn't just wake up gradually. She wakes up instantly and is completely 100% alert. That sudden, jarring awakening at such a hyper-specific time triggers an instant fight or flight response. By 3:30 a.m., she actually completely flees the property. So we really have to ask, what on earth happened in those 23 minutes? Well, she says, then it came again. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate, like someone knocking on a door, waiting politely to be let in. And wow, this is where the auditory dread just locks in. This farmhouse doesn't even have a basement. There was literally nothing under her bedroom floor except dirt and the old stone foundation. Imagine sitting in the pitch dark, knowing there's solid earth beneath you, and hearing deliberate, polite knocking coming from under the floorboards. It completely violates all logic.
And then, the narrative completely shifts gears from sound to smell. Rachel notices a scent drifting into the room, damp, earthy, like soil that had been recently turned over, like a freshly dug grave. Smells, they completely bypass our logic centers and hit our absolute deepest, most primal anxieties. You can cover your ears to stop a sound, but you can't stop breathing. The dread is literally in the air she is pulling deep into her lungs.
And this brilliantly illustrates the climax of that sensory deprivation. Drawn to her window, she looks out toward the hill. That heavy wooden root cellar door, the one secured with a rusted padlock she had never even touched, is standing wide open.
Staring into that absolute, complete darkness, she gets terrifying visual confirmation of the auditory and olfactory horror she just survived. No wonder she bolted.
Section 3. Investigating the open cellar. The return of the impossible.
Okay, so let's slow down and look at the aftermath here. Rachel flees to her neighbors, the Hargroves, arriving at 3:30 in the morning. Harold Hargrove, who's 74, takes her completely seriously, grabs a shotgun, and they head back to the property together. But when they arrive, the root cellar door is closed. The rusted padlock is completely undisturbed and locked tight. Just think about the psychological weight of that impossible reset. She's now trapped between what she absolutely knows she saw and what physical reality is deciding to show her.
As they're standing there in the dark, Harold drops an absolute bombshell. Aunt Carol spent 30 years completely alone on that property, right? Well, he says she used to claim she heard her deceased husband, Thomas, knocking around down there after he died. This one detail ties the immediate terror Rachel is feeling to a deeply buried 30-year history of quiet, desperate isolation. Aunt Carol wasn't just eccentric, she was actively guarding something.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the next morning brings physical evidence that just refuses to be explained away by daylight. The cellar door remains locked, but inside the house, those kitchen chairs have been rearranged yet again. And outside, on the wooden planks directly between the back door and the root cellar, there are two long, muddy streaks, like something heavy had been dragged. This physical evidence completely solidifies the supernatural dread. It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Rachel wasn't just having a nightmare. Section 4. The Psychology of Rural Dread. Tropes of Terror.
So, why does Rachel's experience build suspense so effectively? It uses 3 classic narrative mechanics. First, the rule of 3. 3 deliberate knocks imply intelligence, right? Not just the house settling. Second, the animal excuse. When Rachel calls her friend Dana, Dana suggests it was probably just a raccoon. But that rational explanation totally fails against the reality of an open, padlocked door. And finally, the spooked authority figure. Reverend Dale Mullins comes out, touches the door, and literally goes pale. When even spiritual authority is visually shaken by the unknown, as an audience, we know the threat is the real deal.
160. It cost exactly $160 to have Donnie Pratt, a local welder who asked absolutely 0 questions, weld the cellar shut. It's just such a grounded, almost strangely mundane number for such a desperate, supernatural act. Rachel literally pays cash to seal the terror away in the earth.
Section 5. Sealing the unknown. The aftermath.
Rachel manages to stay for another 6 months before finally selling the property to a young couple from Lexington. But even after that door is welded permanently shut, the cyclical nature of the haunting just keeps going. The knocking at 3 a.m., accompanied by that awful smell of earth, happens 2 more times before she packs up. By selling the house, she's essentially passing the literal and metaphorical key, and the horror, to the next unsuspecting owners.
Rachel's ultimate takeaway is just so profound. She says, some doors are locked for a reason. She chose not to know what her aunt lived near for 3 decades. And honestly, this unresolved ending holds immense power. In psychological horror, the true terror isn't always seeing the monster. Often, the most agonizing dread comes from the intense, stubborn discipline of refusing to look. She walks away, but the memory of that knocking and the smell definitely follows her all the way back to Louisville.
And so, a massive question lingers long after Rachel's story ends. What exactly is waiting in the dark beneath the floorboards on Route 7? It's a genuinely terrifying thought about the buried histories hiding just beneath our feet. Whatever it is, Rachel believes it's incredibly patient, and it will wait as long as it needs to. If any of you watching happen to know this property in Harlan County, or maybe you've experienced this sealed space like this yourself, you gotta drop a comment below. We'd love to hear it. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive in The Explainer, and I'll catch you guys next time.
You can also send us your true horror stories. If you've experienced something terrifying yourself, or if something scary happened to your family members, relatives, or friends, share it with us. Real paranormal experiences, creepy incidents, unexplained events, or any disturbing true story are welcome. Send your true horror stories in this email.